Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Media Group. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Anthony Witrado, here to talk Teoscar Hernandez, the latest rumblings and rumors around Major League Baseball. So we appreciate everybody that's joining us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Anthony, happy Tuesday evening to you. Happy week until Christmas Eve to you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. It's going to be nice going into the new year as World Series champions.
Yes.
You know, just the tears that keep coming are very nice. The latest round being the New York radio host calling the Dodgers classless or something like that, because he thought that the Dodgers sold a baseball that Aaron Judge dropped in Game 5 when it was actually Major League Baseball that sold the ball for charity. So, you know, the tears are sweet this winter.
Yeah. Any more World Series gear on your holiday wish list, or have you did you put a cap on what you intended to acquire?
I put a cap on what I'm buying myself until the next round of stuff comes out next spring. But you know, Christmas is around the corner, so we'll see.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows? All right. Well, as always, we appreciate again everybody joining us live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Let's just start right away with the biggest news story, and it's sort of news story. It's Teoscar Hernandez related, which is the question that everybody is asking. Mark Feinsand had a report, and he clarified something that I don't think we had total clarity on. He said Teoscar Hernandez is seeking a 3-year deal in the $22 to $24 million a year range. He mentioned that the Red Sox and Blue Jays are also teams that are kind of circling Teoscar Hernandez. He also included Anthony Santander in this report, saying he is seeking a 5-year, $100 million range, and listed the Dodgers as a team to watch. So both of these guys have qualifying offers attached. Obviously, the Dodgers gave theirs to Teoscar, so there would be no penalty if they signed him. But let's start with Teoscar. 3 years, $22 to $24 million a year. Your initial reaction when you saw those numbers?
If that's what he's asking for, I'm surprised he hasn't gotten signed yet. That was my initial reaction. I had to do a double take and make sure I was reading everything correctly.
Yeah.
If that's the range he's looking for, I don't know why the Dodgers haven't pulled the trigger, or maybe they have said yes and he's shopping the offer. I don't know. I have not asked much with my sources around Teoscar Hernandez. But again, if that's the case, why is he still on the market if that's the number?
Yeah, I think I'm just speculating here, right? The people that have doubted Teoscar Hernandez's market, or even in some cases, I won't name names here, advocated for not signing him and going out and signing somebody else. The argument has always been age and defense. And I think you could add a third one, which is we've seen like a 1-year sample size of a guy who has played to the level that he played to last year. He had played well prior to that, but not overwhelmingly. There was a reason he signed a 1-year deal with deferrals last year. So I think those would be the 3 data points that someone would point to. Is he's a year older than 12 months ago, last time he was a free agent. The defense is not something you can bank on, especially heading into the future. And so I tweeted out, Anthony, to me, this is encouraging news for the Dodgers, because it tells me that the market around Teoscar Hernandez is clearly not robust. Clearly, these offers haven't come, even with Juan Soto off the table. And so my reaction, Anthony, is that I actually think this helps the Dodgers' chances. This makes me feel it is more likely that if he's not going to get the life-changing money that maybe he was hoping to get with a 3rd year attached to it, that maybe after all, he will end up back in Los Angeles on whatever the best deal he could find was.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you for the most part. The part about this bodes well for the Dodgers, I would tend to lean that way as well. But again, it's curious for me to be like, why hasn't that happened yet? Because if he's actually the one asking for that number,
yeah,
those years at that number, it feels just like a no-brainer. Like, you know, was this his best season? You know, I think it was a kind of a career year for him, sure. But like since 2020, which was the COVID year, so short season, but since then, I mean, he has been a high quality offensive player.
Right.
I think his worst year in those 5 seasons, he had like a OPS plus just over 100, but beyond that, it was like 120s, 130s, a couple of 140s maybe in there. So he's been a solid offensive player. Yes, the defense isn't going to play long term, sure, but 3-year contract isn't very long. And with for all intents and purposes, he performs pretty decently in the first 2 years. He's movable in that third year.
Yeah.
If he's produced. So I was a little stunned that the deal was that short and that cheap in terms of what they're saying he's seeking.
Yeah.
And not what the market is offering him.
Right, because this tells you the market's offering him less than this. Like I see lots of
Right.
people saying, Dodgers, why are you being cheap? Just give it to him. And I'm not saying you're wrong for thinking that, but clearly the Dodgers are not alone. Like the league is speaking. Well,
Yeah.
some pitchers are getting huge contracts way over expectation. You've got a guy in Teoscar Hernandez that clearly has not been given. Like the report doesn't seem to indicate he has a 3-year deal from Boston, but he's
Right.
waiting to see if the Dodgers will match. He doesn't have this offer apparently from anybody. To clean up one thing, because you made this point and it's a good one. 2020, like basically his 134 weighted runs created plus last season was perfectly in line with his 2020, 2021, 2022 seasons. 2023 was the one down year. It was a 106, but the 3 years prior to that, again, the only difference is now those years were 28, 27, 28, 29-year-old seasons. And now we're talking about paying for age 32, 33, 34. Let me ask you this. Offensively, we know how the defense is and how it's going to age. Are you worried at all about how the offense is going to age? Again, we're talking about a guy who is leaving the prime of his career at 32, 33, 34. I mean, maybe not leaving. At the best case scenario, the back end of his prime, worst case scenario, leaving his prime. Is there anything about his offensive profile that makes you worried about how that will age?
Not entirely, because I do give the Dodgers player development group a lot of credit. Not just for him having a bounce back year, but I think what they've done, their track record is great. Justin Turner, Max Muncy, Chris Taylor, even though Taylor's not the guy anymore, but they've turned a bunch of these sort of trash heap kind of players into like all-star caliber offensive, hitters. And not that Teo was, completely in the dumps coming into last offseason, but the offers that he was seeking clearly weren't there. He had a down year going into that, so sort of understandable. But no, and honestly, for that price, it's not the end of the world if he does sort of kind of never lives up to what he did in 2024.
It's interesting. I see some people in the chat, Laura, one of them, asking about how old Chris Taylor is. And it is interesting because Chris Taylor will be entering his age 34 season. And so I'm not saying you're wrong. I want to be abundantly clear about this. Chris Taylor's final year of his contract, is kind of a who cares at this point. But I think it's easy to, on the front end of Teoscar's contract, say, well, who cares about the last year and a half of a 3-year deal? Well, we've lived through the last year and a half of Chris Taylor's deal, and I think people are disappointed. And this is a guy that at the age of 32, 33, and 34 seems to have fallen off a cliff a little bit. Now, the reason I think we need to be careful here is Teoscar Hernandez offensively is a very different profile than Chris Taylor. He was a much more productive offensive player as well. Chris Taylor's value came from a number of other areas that probably age worse than offense. But we know what the defense is. So I think at the Taylor point, there's some validity to it and some differences.
Yeah. Teoscar has been head and shoulders a better offensive player than Chris Taylor ever was with the Dodgers.
Chris Taylor, for context, Chris Taylor, the best offensive season he's ever had was 2020, shortened season, but was a 129 weighted runs created plus. Teoscar has had 4 seasons in the last 5 better than that. So they're again, it's not apples to apples offensively.
Yeah. And so, to my earlier point, I think if he was seeking like a 5-year kind of deal, I'm backing away from that. We've talked about that. Like if that, before Soto signed, we sort of had this conversation about, is Teoscar the next outfielder in line here? We all thought he was. And if we're saying a guy like Soto is going to get that, then maybe Hernandez asked for 5 years. at least test the market there.
Right.
And I think that we were in the same boat where I was sort of like, we love you, Teo. You'll always be a Dodger legend, but you can go take that offer somewhere
You're saying
else.
if there was a 5-year offer on the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we were also thinking like he might be seeking in the $25 to $30 million a year
Right.
range, coming off the kind of season he had. And when I saw the 3 years and the 22 to 25 or whatever it was, I was just like, look, it's such a low risk investment. It is really such a low risk investment, especially for a team like the Dodgers. And a team who knows him, and he's also, because they don't always just sign these guys purely based on numbers. They've built a culture, and they really do value these clubhouse kinds of guys. And for everything that we've seen and heard, Teoscar was one of those guys last year for this team in his first season.
Yeah.
Befriended your best player, from very early on in spring training, and they became really good friends. So like all of that, I think, rolled into it is like, again, feels like a really low risk kind of deal if it's only 3 years. And let me throw one thing at you that we don't know
on the clubhouse culture thing. I'm thinking out loud here. I wonder if the clubhouse culture is one of the biggest reasons why the Dodgers are so afraid to go for a third year. And that might sound weird, but here's what I mean. If Teoscar is really, really bad in that third year, and he is as critical a player in the clubhouse as they think he is, that becomes problematic. And Jason Hayward was far less of a player, but we know how long they hung on. So I'm just talking out loud. Is it possible they're afraid to go to a third year because they're like, man, if this gets to an unplayable level defensively and the offense is slipping, now what do we do with one of the most popular players?
Yeah, that's fair. And it's actually a really good point, I think. How does that play? But Jason Hayward was there longer than Teoscar Hernandez was.
Yeah.
And they did what they had to do there. And
different calibers.
Point, he's a much lesser player, but he was there longer. Look, they did it with Justin Turner, and the culture continued to turn, right? Like guys didn't like it, I'm sure. Like guys had said publicly like they didn't like certain things. They said it about Hayward, they said it with Turner. But things kept moving. So again, I just feel like looking at the years and the number for the AAV, it just feels like because I don't think he falls completely off the face of the earth next season. Maybe it's not as good, but I don't think he falls off the face. And so he's still going to be a fairly productive player. You have a need at that position.
Yeah.
And at worst, then with that theory, my own personal theory, it's those last 2 years that you're kind of eating up and going, this isn't great, but it's 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. And I see some people saying, hey, this is an insult to Teoscar Hernandez. Not what we're saying, but just the way the Dodgers are handling this. Again, it's only an insult if every other team is giving him a dramatically better offer. If every team in Major League Baseball is telling Teoscar the same thing, then you can't really blame the Dodgers and say they're mishandling the situation, at least not yet. A couple super chats here. Kerr says, Bo Sox offer legit, $71 million over 3 years with no deferred money. If that offer was legit and the Feinsand report is true, he would have signed this contract already, because that is more money and the exact same number of years with no deferrals. So I would guess, unless Feinsand is way off, that is unfortunately for Teoscar, not a real report. 300 also had this to say, might be an issue with the amount of deferred money. It's possible. Teoscar didn't have any issue with deferred money on his first contract. I would find it hard to believe that deferrals, Anthony, would be a deal breaker for Teoscar Hernandez here, based on the fact that he took them last time around. But maybe I agree that it's possible. And for the reason you mentioned, it would seem unlikely. Also, for the fact that these other superstar players on that roster all have deferred money would make it seem like that's not the case, but who knows? I think that I'm just really curious to see what the Dodgers are waiting on and what kind of offer they've made to him, or what he's waiting for. What is it about whatever kind of offer that has been put on the table does he not like? Well, let's get to that because we do have one other super chat. Zip code 0 talks about, ask this, is Santander on the radar at all? And Fine Sand, this was maybe the most interesting thing to me beyond the numbers, was he said, and he listed a bunch of teams as teams in on the former Orioles outfielder, but he said the Dodgers are listed as a team to, or excuse me, he said the Dodgers are a team to watch on him. That was surprising to me. I kind of assumed it was Teoscar or bust in the corner outfielder market, but is it possible that some of these teams prefer the guy who hit 44 home runs last year to Teoscar, and Teoscar's kind of got to wait again?
Sure. Then my question would be, what's taking Anthony so long?
Yeah.
Like, what do those deals look like that he's taking this long to figure it out? Like, from the time Juan Soto started meeting with teams to the time he signed, like, actually was not very long. Like, I was way off in how long I thought that was going to take because he was a Boris guy. Like, I mean, we're at the point where I think Anthony Santander could have figured this out already and taken an offer. And then that opens up, Teoscar's market a little more, to at least in terms of like transparency and like, okay, who's truly out there. It seems like for both those guys, like, I really thought that this would work like the kind of the pitching market tends to work, where your real big guy signs, or a couple of your real big guys sign, and then everyone else sort of falls into line after that because the market's been set. I don't know where these second tier kind of outfielders after Soto, where they fit in at this point. It's kind of been one of the more confusing parts of the last like few off seasons, because like these things tend to follow a certain pattern, and this one feels like it's not.
Yeah. It's interesting. That one doesn't make a ton of sense. I tend to believe that the Dodgers would just move on from the corner outfield market if Teoscar isn't the guy, and they would either trade for somebody or just deal with what they've got internally. But remains to be seen. So we'll see. I mean, who knows? Anthony and I have had some good luck on Dodgers making acquisitions during our Tuesday night show. So folks, maybe in the next 45 minutes or so, we'll get lucky, and the Dodgers will make some noise for us. We can only hope. Let's move on, Anthony. I want to talk about a move that apparently the Dodgers almost made. Devin Williams, who got traded to the Yankees earlier this week, when he was talking to the media, he said this, quote, "I kind of thought I'd be going to LA." He said that's what he was being told. There have been reports that Gavin Lux was part of conversations as it relates to Devin Williams. Of course, they end up going with a second base prospect from the Yankees, as well as Nestor Cortez, the starting pitcher. What do you make of, I mean, clearly this wasn't just a rumor, but if people close to Devin Williams are telling him that he might be headed to LA, clearly this got fairly far down the road before the Yankees swooped in.
Yeah, at least far enough that they thought that there was something real there with the Dodgers, because otherwise his agent probably doesn't tell him that.
Yeah.
Or lead him to believe that. That was, when I saw it, it was a little disappointing because he was a guy I wanted. We had talked about it before. I still have a ton of trust in this front office, obviously. And so, for them, not making the offer that was going to win Devin Williams, I'm okay with that, because I still think that they have something going on that is going to improve that bullpen, whether it's another trade for a big name that we're just kind of blind about right now, or if it's Tanner Scott or something like that. I have confidence that they're going to still improve this bullpen. But yeah, when he went to the Yankees and that news was announced, I was like, that kind of sucks. Oh, well. And then when I heard that, I was like, really?
Yeah.
Like, we were that close and we didn't get him, but again,
what's interesting is what cost the Dodgers, right? Like what we don't know is, well, why didn't he end up in LA? Like, was Gavin Lux not enough for the Brewers? Blake Williams on DodgerBlue.com, when he was writing about this, he kind of speculated, like, if they really wanted a guy like Nestor Cortez, is it possible they were asking for Gavin Lux and somebody like a Tony Gonsolin, which to me is like, would have been way too much personally. Is it possible the Dodgers balked at including Gavin Lux, or they had different valuations on a guy like Gavin Lux? Like, there's so many scenarios here, but what we do know is, to your point, this got far enough down the road that Williams was told, hey, this might be happening. So clearly they were in the same ballpark. It wasn't like one call here, one call there, and then the conversation was over. This was multiple discussions, and it neared the finish line.
I'll say this too, for it to get far enough down the line that whether it be his agent or the front office in Milwaukee was telling Devin Williams, like, hey, it's kind of looking like this.
Yeah.
And they will keep a guy, especially when he's sort of been there for a while and he's kind of one of their star players. They will keep him informed in that way, like they'll do him a solid. So, whether it was being relayed to the agent or straight from the front office, there was a sense there that the Dodgers' last offer, let's say, was enough that it could get this over the line. And maybe the Yankees came in with something they just liked better. And so it may not necessarily have been that the Dodgers were withholding anyone until that 11th hour when they said, hey, we have this deal for the Yankees. You now have to include whatever, Gonsolin or something like that. And they said no. So, it may have been that they were putting Lux out there, or they were making someone else who is a big name for the fan base as the centerpiece of this deal. And it just didn't get it done compared to what the Yankees offered.
Yeah, I mean, if the final offer, as a guy in your case who wanted Devin Williams, was interested, I mean, would Lux and Gonsolin have been too much for you?
It feels like a lot there for that, because I think,
and again, I want to clarify, because a lot of times people just hear names and it's like, well, that guy's better than those two. Devin Williams, 1 year remaining, had coming off an injury last year. Gavin Lux, 2 years of team control remaining. Tony Gonsolin, I'm blanking, but at least a couple years of team control remaining as well. So it's not just two guys on a 1 year deal for one guy on a 1 year deal. You've got to factor in some other things.
And two guys who they expect probably to be starters on this roster. Lux obviously at second base, and I find it hard to believe that Gonsolin's not going to find a spot in the rotation in some way. Given the way they kind of like to bounce things around and juggle that rotation, it feels like he's going to be a significant part of the pitching going forward. So I think to put both those guys in the deal like that, again, we don't know that this was the offer, but we're just kind of talking here.
Trying to match up, because they went and got a starting pitcher and a second baseman. These would have been sort of quote unquote comparables.
Right. And so, yeah, it feels like a lot, because the second baseman they did get was we don't know what's going to happen there. And we kind of know, what Lux can be, it has been when he's been good. We know what he looks like when he's been bad, but all of that's to say, like, that probably would have been a lot for a reliever on a 1 year sort of rental contract.
Yeah, and keep in mind, they could go out and just, and I know people are going to say, well, they could have extended Devin Williams, and then it's not a 1 year deal, but then just go sign Tanner Scott. Go give that money to the guy who's a free agent that doesn't cost you your starting second baseman and your sixth or seventh best starting pitcher on opening day, who in one season after your sixth and seventh starting pitcher become very important pieces. So again, Devin Williams, it was clearly close. Blake has reported through some sources that Gavin Lux and Hunter Fiducia were part of conversations involving Devin Williams. Again, that's all we know. We don't know if that was the offer and it wasn't enough, if the Dodgers weren't interested in that, if they asked for more, etc. But Devin Williams thought he might be a Dodger. Turns out he ended up not being.
We also know that this front office does not like to spend big, whether it be prospect capital or monetarily, on relief pitching.
Yeah. And they definitely don't want to do both. They don't want to give up prospect capital and then go pay a guy big money.
Correct. So like I said, I have no doubt there's other things in the works bubbling when it comes to the bullpen. Could be Tanner Scott, and with the understanding that they have been stingy when it comes to paying relievers, but maybe they think he is one of those guys, or there's another trade, like I said, that we just don't know about at the moment.
Totally. All right. Next up, I want to talk briefly. I thought this was really interesting. MLB conducted some research, a study, if you will, on the proliferation of pitching injuries. And Jeff Passan over at ESPN did a great job of kind of summarizing this. I believe it was a 62-page pitching injury report. And Passan did a great job of summarizing. So I want to point people, it's free and unlocked over at ESPN. It is probably the most digestible way to read all of it. Passan said from the get-go, this isn't a report that has solutions. It's kind of a starting point. It's a call to arms to say, we've got an issue. Here's some ideas, etc. He highlighted 5 different takeaways, stuff like the number of guys who get hurt in spring training. He pointed out that from 2018 to 2023, there had never been more than 80 pitchers get hurt between spring training and opening day. That number was 110 last year. So if you're into numbers, that's almost a 50% increase over the highest year in the last 5 years prior to 2024. They officially go on record that velocity, spin chasing, max effort pitching are the most significant causes for arm injury. They talk about the impact of technology and the trickle down that has had to younger pitchers. They talk about minor leagues and how that's preparing people. I thought this was interesting, Anthony, basically saying that minor league players aren't being asked to do the things major league pitchers are. He pointed out that at the majors, 16% of relief appearances were on back-to-back days, and at minor league level, only 2%. The same thing, 10% of minor league starts were on 5 days rest compared to 33% at the major league level. All sorts of stuff. But here's the piece that I kind of want to ask you about because I find this to be the most interesting. This is a quote from Passan. Quote, perhaps the easiest rule changes the league can make are limiting moves back and forth between AAA and the big leagues and limiting the number of pitchers a team can roster, forcing pitchers to chase innings over stuff and strikeouts. Basically, to translate this for people that aren't tracking, he's saying instead of allowing the team like the Dodgers to have 20 pitchers on their 40-man roster that they are constantly shuffling and maxing out at all times and bringing up the next guy and just going to the reliever as quickly as possible, if you couldn't hold 13 pitchers on the major league roster and another 7 to 10 on your 40-man roster, maybe guys wouldn't throw as hard. Maybe guys wouldn't go max effort all the time. And maybe, Anthony, just maybe, we wouldn't have as many arm injuries. I'm curious your thoughts on that specific idea from Passan.
Boy, there's a lot to unpack with it. First of all, something like that has to get through the players' union. I cannot see it happening.
Yeah,
because it's not to say that this would definitely happen, but there are elements of that rule there that could significantly suppress pitcher salaries, and hurt arbitration numbers as well. I think that what you're asking the culture to do is to start valuing innings over outs.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's such a tough sell. Because here's the reason why is guys are still going to draft based on that. And they're still going to protect guys in the minor leagues the way they have been. Because they're waiting. They don't want the guys to waste all those bullets in the minor leagues if they think that they're good enough to be in the big leagues at some point.
Right.
And so, you're asking that entire system to change when for the last, Jeff wrote the arm in
I think it's 12 years ago.
Yeah. And so we're going on 20 years where you can really look back and say, here's what organizations have started to value, and changing 2 decades of that sort of thinking, that sort of reward system, that scouting structure. It's really difficult. And I think that to say we're going to start to limit this now, I just don't think, I think it throws the system into chaos, because I don't think teams are going to make the shift to say, you know what, well, this guy can give us 220 innings as a starter. We're going to value him so much more than the guy who actually has better stuff and throws harder, but might only give us 165 innings. I don't see that happening, because if it were to happen and people were going to start doing that, it would have been happening already. And they have found, one of those, what Moneyball was about, right, was finding the inefficiencies that nobody else was seeing and being able to exploit that. And teams went to shorter starter outings, fresher bullpen arms, and deploying them that way. And then everybody caught on, and now it's the norm. But they were doing that because it was the better way to get outs. And so to ask them to shift that thinking and to continue to try to win, it sort of contradicts the other.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And that's why I think something like Passan's idea, which I agree with you, will probably never get passed. But that would be the only way. Unless you are forcing teams to do this, and there are real consequences that are across the board. No team is just automatically going to say, hey, you know what? We're going to stop going after the guys who are high velocity, high spin rate guys because it's bad for their arms. You're just going to have everybody continue to do. I saw somebody in the chat, they used some words I don't want to post on the screen, but Bob said the Dodgers framework for last year is the future, more waivers, deeper rotations, and everybody's elbow exploding. And it's terrible to say it like that, but the Dodgers are the smartest organization in baseball. And like a year and a half ago, we were talking about how their double-A rotation had a higher average fastball velocity than basically every rotation at any level across Major League Baseball. Not a coincidence that the Dodgers, of all teams, had as many arm injuries as they had. And so he had some other interesting notes in there about trickling stuff down to the youth leagues and saying, like, is there a way to get young people to stop throwing 12 months a year? Is there a way to like re-incentivize away from some of the stuff that is leading to elbow injuries? He had this stat 20 years ago, 5% of drafted pitchers had Tommy John surgery. That's now up over 33%. So this, I want to be clear, because I thought this was an important takeaway. This is not just a major league issue. This is a high school issue. This is a college issue. This is a international issue. Like, this is happening everywhere. And yet the point he makes, which is a great one, is MLB is the trendsetter. MLB sets the rules. If they reward velocity and spin and TrackMan data, then everybody below them and around them is simply going to follow after that. And so there's no simple solution, but as a Dodgers fan who has lived through some really bad arm injury seasons, i.e. last year, it's hard to read this and think that anything's going to change within the Dodgers organization in the short term, at least.
Yeah. And this is, again, this is not a new problem. The report is probably 10 years too late. It said a bunch of stuff we already sort of know. It just, solidified it.
It just came from MLB's mouth. It's the first time that MLB, right, I think, has said these things out loud.
Correct. So I think that it's really hard to sort of put this toothpaste back in the tube, right? Like where it's already out there. Tommy John surgery has become such a norm that teams are drafting pitchers who are either out or who they know are going to be out, and they're not blinking twice about it. Look at Walker Buehler, and so
I joked with Justin Robleski when I met him. I was like, I think you having Tommy John surgery actually is like, I joked. I was like, maybe you were on the Dodgers radar because of it. Like,
right.
Who knows? The Dodgers draft more of these guys than anybody else.
It's going to be really hard to tell somebody at the lower levels, whether that's high school or in college, that, stop looking at the data, or don't worry, don't live by that. The other guy who maybe isn't going to last as long as you in an outing, but he might only give up one run. He might strike out 9 through 6 college innings. If you can give us a complete game and you give up 5 runs and you strike out 4, we're okay with that. No one's going to say that. And no college pitcher is going to be okay with that when the guy next to them is doing the opposite and getting better results. And so, like,
drafted higher and paid more.
Right. And to tell major league teams to stop valuing the guys who have better stuff and better numbers is like, I don't know where that tipping point is.
Yeah. I agree. Zenji with the super chat: would hate to use 40 pitchers in a season again, but Roberts' value shown through because of it. Pitching injuries show the value of a good versus great manager. We're going to talk Dave Roberts in just a second, but briefly, without, again, digging into the Roberts conversation, do you agree with this, that there's a direct correlation between a manager's ability to navigate the number of pitching changes the Dodgers did and also finding success?
Yeah, there's a little bit to that. I mean, if you're doing this and all your pitchers suck, then you're not going to look very good. Yeah. So, a lot of it is just that the Dodgers have a surplus of talent in that area.
Yeah. And I would add, I think it's a reflection of not just Dave Roberts, although he's included, but the entirety of the Dodgers organization, because what they're able to do is get guys ready to go from AAA to the major leagues. They're able to get guys to pitch in uncomfortable situations where sometimes if you're the guy at AAA waiting to get called up, you might not pitch for 8 or 9 days because they can't start you at AAA in case they need you the next day. And then all of a sudden you're called up or you're coming out of the bullpen or whatever. And so I think Dave Roberts is the head of that side of things, but I think the Dodgers organization as a whole, and again, if you followed our channel for a while, we've had an opportunity to chat with guys like Ryan Pepio when he was here, Michael Grove, and they've talked about that the Dodgers prepare you for uncomfortable things at AA and at AAA, knowing that when you get to the major leagues, chances are that's the type of experience you're going to have.
Yeah, and their player development system, we talk about it a lot in different ways. And and this is just one of them. The way that they've been able to build a revolving door of just quality arm after quality arm
Yeah.
is the envy of the league. I mean, look at, it's become such a joke now, like on social media, and even in like, even in the regular media, in the traditional media, when they write stories of like, oh, the Dodgers just signed this pitcher who somebody gave up on, or who people thought were done, and they're like, okay, when's his all-star appearance coming? Because he's with the Dodgers organization now, right? And pitchers have said, when all things were equal, I decided to go there because of what their track record has been with pitching. And so they're an organization like the Dodgers are able to have that kind of ridiculous looking number, and also have been able to withstand that many season ending Tommy John kind of surgeries, shoulder surgeries and things like that, because they have just such an abundance of quality arms up and down the system. Not everybody's a star, but you need those other guys who can at least give you something, and they have a bunch of them. And they're at the forefront. This organization has been at the forefront of like how to manipulate pitching, how to manipulate the rules, how to find those little loopholes and gaps that they're being able to keep their staff as fresh, as healthy, which is relatively speaking, but as good as possible throughout the course of a season. And again, I just don't know where the tipping point is for that culture to say, you know what, we've gone too far. Let's start to go back the other way. Totally.
I agree. David with the super chat, he says, without signing Teoscar Hernandez, what does the starting outfield look like? I mean, it's probably Conforto, Edman, and Andy Pages. In some, rearrange maybe the corner guys. Pages probably in right, Conforto in left, but, mix in a little bit of Chris Taylor, Kike Hernandez, maybe a little James Outman, depending on what he looks like in spring. I mean, that's pretty much the group, barring a trade, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was last week, maybe it was the week before, but I said that if they don't sign Hernandez, their thinking may very well be that they already have the solutions, or at least what they're going to do already internal. Conforto being part of that, maybe Dalton Rushing is a piece of that puzzle. I don't necessarily think if they don't get Hernandez, then they're just going to go out and get the next best free agent to play a corner spot. Like I don't necessarily think that might be plan B. Could be, but we've seen enough of this organization to know like that they'll patchwork something together if they have to. Yeah.
Trade market, also another option as well. I want to talk, Anthony, about Dave Roberts and something Brandon Gomes, said just in the last couple of weeks. Dave Roberts, of course, a lot of speculation about a potential contract extension that is coming. Gomes says that we've talked to Dave. We want to get our team in a good place, and then we're going to go and sit down and talk with him. The question I'm curious about, it's a foregone conclusion that Dave Roberts is going to come back, but I'm curious to hear from you what you think Dave Roberts' next contract might look like. Currently, the highest paid manager in Major League Baseball is Craig Counsell, reportedly making around $8 million. There's not a ton of information about manager salaries. Front Office Sports is the one that I'm sourcing a lot of this from, and they sourced from a few different places. They've got $8 million is what Counsell made in 2024. Do you want to guess what number on the list Dave Roberts is? How many managers in Major League Baseball last season made more money than Dave Roberts, do you think?
Does he sit like around 8 to 10?
He is 11th. In Major League Manager salaries. According to this, $3.25 million is what he's reported to make. He is behind guys like Ron Washington with the Los Angeles Angels, Dave Martinez with the Nationals, and yes, Aaron Boone, what sits one spot ahead of Dave Roberts in the pay rankings for managers. Obviously, as with most sports, Anthony, it is not a matter of how good you are as much as when did you sign the contract that you signed.
Right.
So here's my question. Is Dave Roberts going to get paid more than $8 million a year on his next contract, do you think?
We're thinking he makes around 4 right now.
3.25 is the number that's out there.
I don't think it gets quite that high, but I think he ends up in the top 5 when it's done.
Okay.
Look, I think part of the reason too his contract was where it was at was because there was a lot of questions about him before this World Series.
Yep.
I mean, whole lot of a big chunk of the fan base was ready to move on from him. And there was a part of it that said, look, remember in like August, we were talking about, if this team doesn't win it all, does Dave Roberts make it? And we were saying, well, maybe the injuries are going to save him. But other than that, no, he wouldn't have been safe, right? Like that was sort of kind of, a feeling amongst a lot of folks. And so I think the front office wasn't fully committed that this was going to be the guy going into the next 5 seasons or whatever. But I think now that's changed. I think that, they're going to look at Doc, they're going to look at Doc and say, hey, we're only paying Ohtani $2 million next season, right? Like, we can't give you 10. So no, I don't think he the Cubs are desperate when they went and got Craig Counsell.
And it's worth pointing out, Counsell was a free agent, which almost never happens. He's believed to be one of the better managers. People have pointed out the Brewers, who he left, have seemingly been better than the Cubs, who he went to. I'll just leave it at that. But he was coming from a different position when it comes to negotiating that contract. It's also worth pointing out he makes $8 million. On this list, the second highest paid manager is making $5 million. So when I say Dave is 11th at $3.25 million, he's basically within $1 million of everybody outside the top 3. $5 million, $4.5 million, a bunch of guys at $4 million, and then 3.5, 3.3, 3.25. So I'm looking at this list, Anthony. Torey Lovullo makes $5 million a year. Dave Roberts is going to be a Hall of Famer. He has the greatest win percentage among managers in Major League history. He now has 2 World Series titles. There is no chance he can be making less money than $5 million a year, in my estimation. Because you make a great point. When he negotiated the contract he's on, he was in a very different place as far as the solidity of the footing he had. Now, 2 World Series, negotiating from a position of strength. It can't be less than $5 million, in my estimation.
No. And I think, maybe he doesn't get Counsell money because that was kind of a ridiculous deal. Like, again, the Cubs were really desperate there. But make him number 2.
Yeah.
If that takes $5.5 million or whatever it is, I think he's earned it. Like, we've all had our issues with Dave, but I think him being able to wear all of that and still come out on the other side the way he did this season, and let's be honest, do the job that he did this season with that pitching, was incredibly impressive. And so, we said it the night of, we've said it since then. Dave, I think, has now earned the opportunity to tell the Dodgers when he's done versus vice versa.
And it's worth pointing out, there's a lot of things the Dodgers are limited on when it comes to their money because of penalties like the luxury tax. In theory, they're limited by the luxury tax. Okay. Whether they're actually limited remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But what the Dodgers have consistently done is basically anything there is not a cap or a tax on that they feel like they can get an advantage with, they are going to pay up for it. If it's facilities, if it's nutrition, if it's whatever, right? Your manager's salary does not count against your luxury tax. And so this is an area where the Dodgers can freely spend with no consequences. So I'm with you, $5.5 million, something like that, 4 or 5 years. That feels like the type of deal that's going to be coming down the pike for Dave Roberts. If I had to guess, is that same ballpark, 4 years, 20, 22 million, something in there?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking as well. You give him that bump that probably puts him just below Counsell at some level.
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate. And I think too, the other thing is, like, if they were to get rid of Dave, which they're not, but like if they were, who are you then going to get and say, we're going to move on from Dave Roberts as an organization, not he's leaving us, we're moving him along.
Yeah.
Who do you go get that you can just say, like, okay, yeah, he's going to have a bigger impact in the clubhouse, or he's going to have a bigger impact on win total during the regular season? Like, I don't know that guy exists.
Yeah, he doesn't. I mean,
and that's not to say that Dave Roberts is the greatest manager ever. It's just that he fits here. The players love playing for him.
Yep.
And managers, you've heard my theory on this, that managers account for somewhere between 5 and 8 wins a season, maybe, and it's maybe a little greater in the playoffs because of some of the bullpen moves that they have to make. But I mean, they have their guy, and so you know what? Just pay him. He's given you 2 rings. He just finished off one of the most impressive, I think, managerial runs in franchise history. Like seriously, considering what he went into that 100%. Postseason with. So yeah, again, I think he's earned it. And I don't see what the better option is out there if they were to move on from him.
Yeah, and that has always been my point, is regardless of what you think of Dave Roberts, give me the name that is better than him. And that's typically where those conversations end. So again, Dave Roberts expected to get taken care of at some point this offseason once the dust settles and Teoscar Hernandez does or does not sign, Tanner Scott does or does not sign, and Walker Buehler, Clayton Kershaw do or do not sign. Dave Roberts will get taken care of. The question is, how high on the list of highest paid managers will he ultimately be? Let's get to a couple super chats here. Tim says, prediction time. Will a Dodger win rookie of the year in 2025? By the way, have they met with him yet? I don't believe there's been any reports of any teams officially meeting with Roki Sasaki. Again, he will not be signing officially until after January 15th. It seems like he can be meeting with teams in this dead period. He just can't sign anything. But as far as I know, Anthony, there's no official meetings that I've been made aware of.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything either. Just that he is in LA and he's been working out. And I think I saw that he's probably going to take all his meetings with teams in LA. It's it's where his agency is. That's not a unusual thing. It happens all the time. But yeah, I haven't heard of any teams actually meeting with him yet.
Yeah. His first question, will a Dodger win rookie of the year? And maybe Roki Sasaki will be that player, but Dalton Rushing, I suppose, could be another guy that could be in the mix.
Feels like they're the only two possibilities at the moment.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I mean, I suppose there's a starting pitcher who could make his debut if it's a guy like Nick Frasso coming back from injury. I'm not saying that will happen, but that would be the only other sort of quote unquote candidate that I could see. So, yeah, I mean, and even Roki Sasaki, like even if he comes over and is a Dodger, I wouldn't necessarily, he'll be the favorite, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's a lock coming to a new league, had some injury issues last year. So I'm not saying they shouldn't sign him. I hope
they're also probably going to baby his innings too.
Totally.
At least during the regular season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Zip code 0, back to the manager conversation. Is Kershaw not manager material? I don't think Clayton Kershaw has any interest in this. He has lamented every single year that he signs a new contract, the amount of time it costs him to be away from his family. There is no chance, 0% chance. You can mark it here, put my words in permanent marker, clip this if I'm wrong. 0% chance Clayton Kershaw is a manager when he is done playing baseball. He is going to go home and spend time with his wife and kids. Maybe when they're all out of the house, 15 years from now, maybe, but I'm still going to say no.
Yeah, I don't think he would. I also don't know if he'd be a great manager. Like,
it's possible. Yeah.
He's good when he's one of 26, I think.
Pitchers don't tend to, there's not really any pitchers I can think of who have made that transition, right?
Yeah. And he, guys who are as good as he was, like greatest of your generation types.
Yeah.
That like the focus and the commitment it takes to be that good does not typically translate to like managing an entire roster.
Yeah. It's a great point. All right, last thing here before we get to your questions. Everybody's favorite segment, Meet the Newest Dodger, Matt Sauer. Let me introduce you to Matt Sauer, folks. 25-year-old right-handed pitcher, was a starter, spent most of last year as a reliever, signed to a minor league deal with an invitation to spring training, this via Kylie McDaniel over at ESPN. He was a second-round pick of the Yankees 7.5 years ago. Rule 5 drafted by the Kansas City Royals last year and then returned because he wasn't very good. 7.7 ERA in 16.1 innings in his major league debut. Prior to last season, had never pitched above AA. Then he was returned to the Yankees, pitched in AAA where he struggled. But look, if you're looking for a silver lining here, Anthony, I'm not saying Matt Sauer is going to be a difference maker, okay? I'm just giving you the positive reports. MLB Trade Rumors pointed this out. Over his last 24 innings at AAA last year, he settled in and was very good. 2.6 ERA, 22% strikeout rate, 3% walk rate, a 46% ground ball rate. Again, was a starter, moved to reliever. My info here is always the same. High likelihood you never hear of this guy ever again unless you're an Oklahoma City Comets fan. But there you go. He's technically a minor league member of the Dodgers organization.
It's what we were talking about 10 minutes ago or whatever. Pencil him in for the 2026 All-Star game.
Yeah, exactly. Pencil him in for some high leverage innings in November next year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get to some questions, folks. If you've got all caps questions in the chat, we will get to some of those for the next 10-ish minutes or so. We'd love to get some of those. And hey, if you've got some fun questions, I know, look, we're all aware of the amount of content that we've currently got to cover here, but we're doing our best, folks. So we appreciate the folks joining us on YouTube and on Twitter. We've been having some issues with Facebook, so apologies to those people. David, of course, has got a food question. We'll save that one to the end. SK says, have you seen a picture of Soto and his gut? Dodgers dodged a bullet on that one. I have not seen the picture.
I saw it.
And did the Dodgers dodge a bullet, Anthony?
I mean, the pose isn't the most flattering that he's, photographed in. He's got a little boiler popping out, kind of. It's not like Tommy Lasorda level, but it doesn't look great for a guy you just signed for that long and that much, who has to play the outfield for a little while. Look, I think we both said we didn't want him for that many years and that much money. So I think they dodged the bullet regardless, because that contract don't age well. I also don't think he's there for the 5th season of it. I think he opts out. But that's the Mets mess now. Let's see if it gets them closer to a World Series. I don't believe so.
Okay, there we go. Here's a good question. Wolf Mask Jack says, could we have tried to trade for Belly? The Yankees traded for him for peanuts. Cody Bellinger moved to the New York Yankees today for basically a journeyman relief pitcher. Obviously, most of this had to do with the amount of money, I would say, left on Cody Bellinger's contract. I believe he was due $27+ million this year and has a $25 million player option, something like that for next year. We're talking corner outfielders here, Anthony. I know Bellinger has announced will be playing center field for the Yankees, but should Cody Bellinger have been the corner outfielder the Dodgers went after?
I was curious if how much they would play in those waters for him. And we don't know what any phone call like that might have looked like. But I was curious because he would have filled the need. Do you want to dip your toe back into that pool? I don't know if you're that front office. It felt they've had some opportunities, I think, to go back toward him, and they've avoided it.
Yep.
And so they know something else, or they're just not intrigued at all by it anymore. So again, I trust this front office when it comes to things like that. I think fans might have been intrigued and probably excited if it would have happened, but I think the front office probably tends to know better than we do.
With all due respect to the man who, prior to Freddie Freeman, had hit the most important Dodgers home run of my personal lifetime, which was Game 7 of the 2020 NLCS, and for which he will be forever a Dodgers legend, even though it resulted in him dislocating his shoulder. But whatever. Game 7 NLCS, Cody Bellinger. Best moment of the 2020 World Series run, in my estimation. With all due respect to that man, I'm very glad that Cody Bellinger is not coming back. This is a guy who was good and has not been good for a little bit of time. I know last year, 2023, the numbers popped a little bit and improved, but if you looked at the underlying metrics, there was not a lot there. Even despite, I believe that year he posted an 881 OPS. If you dig into some of the underlying stuff, he was in the 10th percentile for hard hit rate. That number was 15th percentile last year. Basically, every major metric is kind of headed in the wrong direction from Cody Bellinger. And so for $52 million over the net, let me put this in perspective. If Teoscar Hernandez is seeking a 3-year deal for 22 to 24 million, that means you could probably go get him for 3 years and 60 million ish. Cody Bellinger is going to get paid 52 over the next 2, assuming he opts into that next extra year, which if you're getting traded for a middling relief pitcher, I think you're opting into that 25 million. Yeah. So I would much rather go pay Teoscar Hernandez 60 to 65 over 3 years than I would Cody Bellinger 52 over 2.
I agree. And look, it's become very clear that the Dodgers got the best years out of Cody Bellinger. He won an MVP award. He won a World Series here. He hit that big home run, which will forever live in Dodger history. They've clearly moved on from the Cody Bellinger, flirting or kicking the tires on or anything like that. They're good with what they have.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Jonathan says Sauer will be a sick, immaculate grid pull if he ever makes the team. Connor Brogdon, Travis Darno level. He said, FYI, the grid does not count Danny Duffy as a Dodger. So Jonathan, again, filling us in with our Danny Duffy information. We appreciate that. Were you ever into immaculate grid? I was into it at first. I have such a terrible memory, though, that I'm just not good. Like Dodgers I could get, but if you're asking me for like obscure Baltimore Orioles players, I got nothing for you.
Yeah. It's a cool game. Like the concept is cool. I got turned off when like every single media person that I follow on Twitter was posting their results every single day,
And
all
how
the
rare
time.
they were.
Yeah. I was like, stop.
Yeah, I'm with you. But Jonathan is a great one. You're going to have to remember, I already forgot. What's this guy's first name? Matt Sauer. So there you go. Remember that if you still play Immaculate Grid. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. We appreciate it. Elishiva wants to know, will the Dodgers bring back Kike? I said yes. Of all the guys who are not currently Dodgers, I think who were last year, I think Kike, other than Kershaw, is the highest likelihood. I think he's more likely than Teoscar, who I think will be a Dodger. I think he's more likely than Walker Buehler. So I still think Kike comes back.
I think so too. Yeah.
Let's see. Scooter says, is Santander that much worse than Teoscar Hernandez? Most people, I think, would argue that he's better and that he's a little bit younger. He's a guy who's projected to get, again, he's seeking a 5-year deal of over $100 million. So he's basically seeking the same AAV, except with 2 extra years on it because he's 30 years old compared to Teoscar. He's coming off a season in which he hit 44 home runs last year, posted a career high in OPS. Again, there's some numbers that tell you he's really good. The barrel rate is really, really good. He hit 44 home runs. There's some other numbers, the chase rate, the expected batting average that would tell you it's not that great. He's I would say at least in the same ballpark of as bad a defender as Teoscar Hernandez, even though he's a little bit younger, better arm, slower. So is he? It's an interesting question the way it's worded. Is he that much worse than Teoscar? He feels very similar to Teoscar, just younger to me, Anthony.
Yeah, I agree. He feels similar. He's like he's 2 years younger than he is, I think.
Yeah, he's 30. I'd have to go check it at like kind of what his actual. So he just turned 30 at the end of October.
Yeah. So and Teoscar's track record of being that kind of offensive player is a little bit longer. Santander maybe has some more power, possibly. Like I think it's sort of a wash to me, even though his total was more. He also plays in Baltimore, which is a little better than Dodger Stadium. So the 2 extra years, it's a no-go. If you're choosing between Hernandez and that kind of deal, I'm going with the shorter one for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. TQT. AA metrics rate Dalton rushing extremely well. If Teoscar is re-signed and with Smith extended, how do we get rushing playing time, or will he rot a la Michael Busch? I think he's going to get a chance at some point. Keep in mind that Michael Busch, I'd have to go back and look at like kind of how many years he was hanging out in AAA. Dalton Rushing was at AAA for the last like 3 or 4 weeks of last season. So even if he spends all of 2025, which I am not saying is happening, but even if he spends most of 2025 at AAA, we are not yet at a Michael Busch situation. And I would point out, it's highly possible that one of the reasons they don't want to go to a 3rd year for Teoscar Hernandez might have something to do with Dalton Rushing. Like it's possible they don't want to keep signing guys that are blocking his pathway, even if they do think Dalton Rushing isn't the answer in 2025.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And I don't think that I think they're looking for ways to open pathways for Rushing versus doing things that would keep blocking him. Yeah. Maybe it's a little bit of a different way to say what you just said, Jeff, but I think that they're more actively looking to get him into onto the roster than they were Michael Busch then. Yeah.
Busch, by the way, 111 games at AAA in 22 and 100 more games in 2023. So Dalton Rushing, again, I think has played like 20 maybe total. So we're like a year and a half away from him spending as much time. And Michael Busch rotted at AAA because he didn't have anywhere to play defensively. Dalton Rushing, by all accounts, needs more time to play outfield. He's only been playing outfield for a little while, but once he gets going, he should be fine.
And the reason they experimented with him in left field was to open other pathways for him to the big leagues.
Yep, exactly. Okay, zip code 0. If you could do it all over again, Anthony, would you beat the Rangers offer for Corey Seager?
That's a cool question. No, I would not.
Okay, talk me through it.
He's a great Dodger. But again, I think in totality, they probably got the best years out of him.
Yeah.
And it just feels like he's not going to be durable enough throughout the life of that contract. And I know the Dodgers still have, they have that need there, but I think that money was better spent on Shohei Ohtani, Teoscar Hernandez, Yamamoto, Blake Snell,
Yeah.
And it's not to say that they would not have continued to spend, but long term, it didn't seem like a great deal, when it happened. And he's had some great moments, obviously, but I think durability will be an issue for him going forward. He may not be a shortstop either.
Yeah, he's got 7 years at $32.5 million remaining on that deal, which started in 2022. I tend to side with you. Obviously, he goes and wins the World Series with Texas. I would say the Dodgers then coming back and winning it in 2024 kind of validates the decision that they've made. Because again, the argument was never how good or bad the first 4 years of a Corey Seager contract were going to be. It was, how about the last few? He played 119 and 123 games the last 2 years. Very, very good, right? He's been very, very good for Texas. But I think the Dodgers, from a long-term financial security perspective, are probably fine. And keep in mind, Corey Seager leaving is probably a large part of the reason that Freddie Freeman's a Dodger. And in case you watch Game 1 of the World Series this past year, I'm very thankful that Freddie Freeman is a Dodger.
Same.
Laker Toby says, I love Mookie Betts, but I don't think an entire offseason to work on shortstop is going to make a difference. I hope they have a plan B. Laker Toby, let me introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Miguel Rojas. His nickname is Plan B, I believe, at the shortstop position. Tommy Edman, maybe as well. But where do you stand, Anthony? Do you think an entire offseason, Mookie Betts, I'm going to be the shortstop next year, a position he wants to play, he's excited to play. Do you think it will make a difference?
Yes. Yeah. We appreciate the super chat, Laker Toby, but I don't agree with the first part of that statement. I think a full off season and spring training will make a difference. Yeah. I don't think he's going to win a Gold Glove or anything like that. He's not going to be an elite defensive shortstop, but I think
he's going to win a Platinum Glove instead at shortstop.
Diamond. I think we're going to see a better defensive version of Mookie Betts than we did last year, when he basically had like a week to prepare for the regular season at that position.
If Mookie Betts is league average at shortstop defensively, is that good enough for you?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's important to just establish what the bar is, because I agree with you. I think with an entire offseason, he can get to league average. I'm mostly encouraged by the fact that what he was bad at was throwing the ball, not so much the range or moving to his left or to his right. I refuse to believe that a guy as athletic as Mookie Betts with the arm that he has won't be able to figure out the throwing piece. So I just think he'll figure it out. And again, if he's average, then he's average. Mr. John Rod says, realistically, is there a payroll number the Dodgers won't cross? They are already pretty high without the signings still left. Clearly they have a number. Like, clearly they don't just sign guys and throw money around for the sake of it. Otherwise, I think Teoscar Hernandez, who they've been open about wanting, would be a Dodger. So clearly they have limits on individual players. But do you think the Dodgers almost at any level are having to make sort of sacrifices? Well, if we do A, then we won't be able to afford B.
There's some of that calculus going on, but it's only because of what they already have stocked, right? Like the contracts of Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, Yamamoto, Snell, Glass now. Like it's because of those, Will Smith, it's because of those deals. I think that they are like, because what it means is there's not a lot left for them to, like, there's not a lot of need to go and get the next guy who's going to cost 9 figures. So I think then they are, improving on the fringes and improving in other ways, whether that be by trade or it's a Dalton Rushing situation, something like that. Later down the road, or River Ryan, those kinds of things. To answer the question, is there a number they won't cross? We don't know, because we don't know what's going to be available. And I think with this front office, they have identified these next however many years as their window to win as many as they possibly can. And let's say it's the life of, like, I don't know, Freddie's contract, which has I don't know what, 4 years left on it or something like
Yeah,
that.
I think 3.
3. So maybe the next 3 to 5 years they're identifying as like, let's go get 3 more of these things.
Yeah.
And then if somebody comes available, then I think they take it on a case by case basis, and
Yeah.
they start to evaluate what that looks like for their bottom line. I mean, right now this organization is printing money.
Yeah.
Considering, all the sponsorships, what they're doing in the stadium, things like that. And so I
Winning a
think
World
that
Series.
them crossing a certain threshold does not necessarily affect the bottom line the way it might for some other organizations like maybe the Yankees at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think the only thing stopping the Dodgers is their own sort of like evaluation of players, but also like there's only so many guys you can sign to contracts. I've made the point. Like if you look at the Dodgers starting defensive or their lineup, basically, Gavin Lux is the only guy who's not going to be making $10 million or more next season. So like there's only so many spots that you can. This is if they sign Teoscar Hernandez.
Yeah.
There's only so many spots you can put these guys. If you look at the rotation, Glasnow, Snell, Yamamoto, you're paying 3 guys at the very, very top. And you've got young arms that you're trying to make room for as well. Clayton Kershaw will probably get a hefty amount of money as well. Obviously, Shohei Ohtani once he's mixed in there. So part of it is you can only pay these guys so much. There's only so many guys you could pay. I think that's almost more of a limit than an actual number. So,
and we've talked about it before too, that have how much they value roster flexibility, and signing so many of those, long-term kinds of deals really limits that. So they're trying to keep, they're trying to walk that line, I think. And so far they've done a pretty good job.
Yeah. A couple real quick. Elishiva says, any chance the Dodgers pick up Honeywell for at least AAA? My guess is they would love to have him back. It's just a matter of if he thinks he can go get a major league deal. He probably knows has a far greater chance of getting a major league deal or even latching on with the team out of spring training somewhere else, the Dodgers, just because of how loaded the bullpen is. So I imagine he kind of knows where he stands in the Dodgers organization, is hoping for a little more stability. Pad Meep says, if we get Walker Buehler back, will we use one of our starters in a trade, perhaps for Seiya Suzuki? I thought this was interesting. If you miss out on Teoscar, is it possible then that you turn around and say, okay, we're going to spend some of this money on a guy like Walker Buehler, and then whether it's Gavin Stone, Landon Knack, Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May, some combo of guys like that, is somebody like that then Bobby Miller, moved in a package for a guy like Seiya Suzuki?
Yeah, I can see it happening. It's something that I think we've touched on too before, of like, they do kind of have this surplus. And if an opportunity presents itself to get better in a different way, we talked about maybe this is how they fill shortstop before the Mookie news, maybe this is how they fill an outfield spot or something like that. It's by using some of those arms that are a little cheaper, and saying, we're going to move this to get this piece and we'll get better in that way versus like just going out and spending the money. Yeah.
I mean, look, if the Dodgers are probably factoring in, we would prefer to have Teoscar Hernandez, but if we can't get him, which would we rather have, Teoscar Hernandez and Bobby Miller, or Seiya Suzuki and Walker Buehler, right? Like if Teoscar is now off the board and they say, okay, well, we can add a starter, make this guy expendable, and then fix the corner outfield spot that way, you could see kind of the way they get to a place like that. Right. Zip code 0 with a huge super chat. We appreciate the $20 super chat. Zip code. Why are there no big signature sneakers? Griffey, Frank Thomas, Jeter, Ohtani just got his. The money and names in MLB is huge now. Why don't Mookie, Judge, Acuna have signature shoes? Any thoughts on this one, Anthony? I mean, we know MLB doesn't do a great job of marketing their guys. Does this say more about MLB's marketing or just the MLB cleat world?
Yeah, it says more about Major League Baseball's failure to market their superstars in a way that attracts casual fans. Griffey and Frank Thomas had sneakers, and they sold well from what I would figure.
People in the chat are clarifying. Are we talking like cleats or sneakers here?
I'm talking sneakers, because I think you want to sell, right? Like,
so we're not talking baseball cleats. We're talking like you go into Nike or New Balance or whatever, and you can get a Shohei Ohtani shoe.
Correct. And typically what they would, like Ken Griffey Jr., Frank Thomas, those they were like trainers, right? Like training kind of shoes, which were basically their spikes without the spikes. Jeter, I don't really remember having an actual sneaker. maybe a mistake in there, but also I think in the time of Griffey and Frank Thomas, baseball was the top sport in this country, and it is like third now. And so putting Ronald Acuña's name on a signature sneaker is not a great investment for, I think he's with New Balance. It's probably not a great investment for New Balance versus like them signing Tyrese Maxey from the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah. Yeah. These are the Griffey ones I just looked up. They're like Nike Air Maxes. They look like basketball shoes, basically. Yeah. So there you go. Okay. David, food question to send us home. What's your late night snack before bed? He wants to know.
I saw this roll through the chat earlier. This is a good one. I'm a big like make my own popcorn guy.
Okay.
So that is
like we're talking popcorn seeds, stovetop pot, the whole deal.
Yeah. My wife bought me a big movie theater style popcorn maker.
Like stand up, like full deal.
It's countertop, but it's a pretty good size. And so yeah, I have all the oils, all the powders that it takes to make it taste like movie style, like all that kind of stuff. So
are we just going straight butter, or we got some we mix in some stuff?
It's oil.
Okay.
It's a butter topping oil. Like I did a bunch of research when I got this thing. I got it for Christmas a handful of years ago or something like that. Cause I was the guy who would like go to the movies and watch it. I've seen so many movies I do not really care to see because I was like, I want popcorn and a large cherry Coke.
Cherry Coke.
So no question about it, David. I am a big popcorn guy.
But so we're just going like movie theater style. We're not doing like chocolate popcorn or
every once in a while, because I'm a big, I have a smoker and like I do a bunch of cooking. And so every once in a while I'll throw in some of the seasonings that I use for smoking things into it. I also have I have a caramel topping that I'll use every once in a while, but like typically like I'm just the movie theater style popcorn is my go-to.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I would say like a quesadilla. Like if I'm just hungry and need to throw something together, a little quesadilla on the stovetop is probably one. Chips and salsa would be the other. It's kind of like if I'm lazy.
Yeah.
And that's what we got. Best salsa for popcorn, somebody asked. What in the world? Salsa and popcorn?
I'll use I mean, I don't.
Did you say this? Do you put salsa on popcorn?
I don't call this salsa, but maybe this is what Jesus is referring to. Like I'll put tapatio on popcorn, if I'm in the mood.
Okay. I could see that. Salsa. I'm just thinking like, yeah, give me the medium pico de gallo, throw that all over the top of popcorn. I'm just like, you just digging your hand in and just scooping out chunks of tomato. I don't know. That's, anyways, there you go. What's your salsa? Go-to salsa. Chips and salsa, man. Are you like a pico de gallo? Are you a salsa verde? Where are we at?
Yeah, if I'm eating like a salsa, it has to be really fine. Like I'm not a big chunky guy. It's got to be pretty fine. And it's got to have some heat. For me to like really like
I was going to say
going back for it.
Look, we could guess what heat level different guys on the DodgerHeads show would be throwing in their salsas. Let's just say there's one guy that mild might be a little too spicy for him, but are you a medium guy or a hot guy?
Hot.
Okay, straight hot. I'm a medium guy. I'll be honest. I'll
own
that my own.
Yeah, it's all good.
But yeah, I just love traditional pico de gallo.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not a super big onions guy, so I tend not to go for that, and which is also why I like them to be very fine because typically right there's going to be onions in it. Yeah. And so like if it's fine, it's good because I do like onion flavor. I think for me it's like texture, but and I just don't go for hot just for the sake of being hot. Like it has to taste good.
Yeah, I'm with you. Did you ever go to the restaurant Chevy's? I don't even know if it's still around.
Oh boy, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't remember if I've ever.
They had one up here. It's closed. That's why I don't even know if they still exist. But oh man, they had the best chips and salsa. Like I would just go in there and buy their chips and salsa without actually eating at the restaurant. And it was kind of, if I'm remembering right, like more of a fine, not chunky salsa. Unbelievable, fantastic. Yeah. So, anyways. Sadly, I don't even know if it still exists. So we'll end on that. People love it. Chevy's with the birthday sombrero. Heck yeah. So, all right, folks, that'll do it for us. Thanks for joining us on a Tuesday night. Again, that's Anthony Witrado. I'm Jeff Spiegel. This is DodgerHeads presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Medium Large Sports Media Group. As always, check out DodgerBlue.com, Dodger Blue 1958 on social media for all the latest news. If you're a podcast person, Apple, Spotify, Google, please go find us on DodgerHeads and rate and review. We greatly appreciate that. Programming note, in case you have done the math, next Tuesday, Christmas Eve, we will not be here live. The Tuesday after that, New Year's Eve, we will not be here live. We will have content for you. The Tuesday night show is the only show that's going to be impacted, but we will have content. It just might be recorded earlier in the day and then posted later on. So go spend some time with your family. Go enjoy the holidays. Buy some more Dodgers 2024 World Series champs gear. I don't know what you got to do, but go ahead and do it. Enjoy the rest of your night, everyone. As always, go Dodgers.